We're launching a new display as part of the Troubles and Beyond exhibition, entitled Following the Footsteps of the Disappeared. This display has been designed to mark the 10th annual International Day of Victims of Enforced Disappearance and comprises pieces from countries around the world, including Zimbabwe, Chile, and the Republic of Ireland.
I'm Roberta Bacic. I'm the curator of Conflict Textiles, and today we are opening the exhibition Following the Footsteps of the Disappeared 2021 with the Ulster Museum. So we are here today with some visitors. We are very happy that we can have people in person having a view of these textiles. We have some as part of the Troubles and Beyond exhibition. Today we have pieces from Zimbabwe, from Chile, from Argentina, from Northern Ireland, from Brazil. So La Cueca Sola, or Dancing Cueca Alone, is a textile or an arpillera made in Chile by a Chilean woman who was part of the Association of the Relatives of the Detained Disappeared, and told the story about her disappeared relative in a textile format. So women did it during the Pinochet dictatorship between 1973 and 1990, and they managed in the one way to tell the narrative, the experience, the way it affected the social tissue, the relationships they had to establish between other women to empower themselves and search for the bodies of the disappeared, but also it's helped as a way to denounce what was going on, and these small pieces were exported and brought to different countries that started to campaign to the end of the dictatorship. What is very relevant about this piece, it represents women from Chile dancing the national dance that normally is danced with a very colored skirt and apron. They are dancing with a very somber black skirt because they are in mourning, because their men have been disappeared. They wear a blouse, a very white blouse, and on the side of their heart, they carry the photo of their disappeared loved one. Now, these women not only were sewing in rooms and in workshops together, they were also campaigning in the streets, and they also created a folk dance music group that would perform the national dance called La Cueca. So they would have danced in solo at the entrance of different public buildings, and quite often they were arrested while doing it.
I am Pamela. I am from Chile. I am an arpillerista from the 80s. The curator has made this respectful way of display the work that we did in those times, and people are still working on. Brings back memories of very traumatic experiences when you live in a country under a dictatorship. Trying to see the reality from different points of view. Then there are all these snaps of hope and suffering that we try to write, to try to say without words. There are things that you cannot say with words, that you can put them through an artwork beautifully.
I'm Brandon Hamber. I'm the John Hume and Thomas P. O'Neill Chair in Peace at Ulster University. And I've been involved with Conflict Textiles since about 2007. And for me, my involvement and directly now with the Following the Footsteps exhibition is really about one thing. It's about the fact that these textiles represent testimony. So we're used to thinking of testimonies as something that someone gives in a book or talks to, tells their story. But these textiles tell their own stories. And as I said, for me, this is a form of testimony, and they tell the stories of families of the disappeared from all over the world. and in their representations, in the quality, in the way that the stories are told through the imagery, I think we learn so much about the plight of the families of the disappeared and the space they find themselves in when governments particularly, but not always governments, sometimes other groups, have disappeared their relatives. From the university side, our interest has been to use this in an educational way, not only for our students, but also for the public, to tell these stories, for more people to engage with them. And that's why we're delighted to be partnering with Ulster Museum, who can really bring these textiles to a much wider audience. The piece I chose to talk about today is a piece from 1980. It's called Women Chained to the Parliament Gates, and it's an image of women in Chile protesting about their disappeared relatives and wanting more information and essentially truth and justice. And I chose this piece for a number of reasons. Firstly, because of the intricacy of it. You can see the small images of their missing relatives pinned to them in the way that women traditionally did that in Chile. You can also see the chains, and the representation for me is just very real and very evocative. And that's why I chose the piece. I also chose the piece because I think there's a tendency sometimes that people think of those who are victims of conflict as passive. And what this piece really shows is how active and powerful these groups are, and that we need to really pay attention to their plight. And for me, this piece just captures that sense of agency and activity and the politics of the families of the disappeared.
And what's really struck me is the diversity of the group here today, the different interests in these textiles from all over the world. We have activists, academics, we have people themselves who created some of the apieras in order to protest against some terrible regime. It's just amazing that these stories are being captured and displayed here today in the flesh, not behind glass as well, to see some of the pieces up close and be able to touch them and interact with them as well.
My name's Gillian Robinson. I'm an Emeritus Professor at Ulster University, and I've worked with Conflict Textiles since 2008. Today I want to share with you this piece, an Argentinian piece made in 2018 by Ana Zlatkas. It's called Edime Periano's Presence, and it takes us back to Argentina in the late 1970s under the rulership of Lieutenant General Videlma. When there were numerous human rights violations going on in that country. In fact, in a 1984 report, over 9,000 disappearances were reported. In this case, Edime was a young lawyer who was one of the victims of these disappearances. She was lifted off the streets, taken to a detention centre, torture centre. She was sedated, bundled into a plane, and thrown out of the plane alive over the river in Argentina. Many years later, her sister gave the artist Ana Zlatkas this jumper, which Edime had knitted herself. And on the jumper, Ana has done an embroidery piece of a forest. And this connects us to the forests that Edime would have seen as she fell from the plane.
Hello, my name's Deborah Stockdale. I'm an artist, an arpierist, and an associate of Conflict Textiles with Roberta Bacic and Doherty. I made an arpiera that is part of this exhibition in the Ulster Museum. It's called They Fell Like Stars from the Sky. In it portrays a story of the dirty war in Argentina during the 1970s and 80s. Part of that conflict involved people being thrown from planes. Often these people were alive when they were being thrown. And I embroidered small red hearts on the figures to show that this was the case. The middle part of the arpiera describes a young medical doctor, and I was put in communication with her husband. She was disappeared during this war, and he sent me a tablecloth that they used regularly, a picture, and some letters that they had. In the river, in the middle part of this piece, I have embroidered phrases from the letters, like I love you and I can't wait till we meet again. The bottom part of the arpiera has a circle of grandmothers in white headscarves. These are the abuelas de Plaza de Mayo, and these were the women that demonstrated every week to find their disappeared and their loved ones. They showed up in the plaza in the middle of Buenos Aires without fail, and their efforts have resulted in many people being identified and enabled people to have closure on the deaths of these people.
This is Recovering the Disappeared, a Chilean arpiera from 1990. I am Lauren Dempster. I'm a lecturer at Queen's University, Belfast, and I became involved with the Conflict Textiles team through working with Roberta and Briege to put on an exhibition in Queen's Library of a number of textiles. We've been able to draw on these textiles in our teaching, so encouraging our students to go and see them. And for instance, this year I was able to talk to my counterterrorism and human rights class about a textile on drone warfare. So the textiles are a really useful tool for us in teaching. It's a way of engaging our students with human rights issues in a different way.
I'm Briege Doherty, and I work with Conflict Textiles as assistant curator with Roberta Bacic and Gillian Robinson. We have a number of arpieras in this exhibition. Sala de Torturas, Torture Chamber, was made by Violeta Morales. It dates back from the 1970s. Violeta was very involved. Her brother Newton disappeared in 1974, and she made it her life's work then, searching for the disappeared, denouncing, resisting, highlighting the torture at home and abroad. The torture that's depicted here in this arpiera. We see it's very stark, the red and the black, unlike many other arpieras which are very colourful. But here she depicts the dehumanising effects of torture on individuals, shows them in a variety of positions. And this, in many ways, it highlighted the actual reality of what was happening in Chile, that people were being tortured and disappeared.
I've only recently been introduced to the Conflict Textiles project, and it's been a fascinating journey to discover how much meaning lies beneath the surface with these wonderful pieces of work. They're not just pieces of patchwork quilt. They've got an enormous significance and story and a resonance for all of us, I think, as we look into the history of the disappeared and what it means to have lived with hope that they might return.